Hey guys, and welcome to the long-awaited in-depth analysis video of the decisive Game 5 of my finals match against fellow Grandmaster Ian Weinstein at the 2024 Scrabble Players Championship held in South Bend, Indiana. If you've been following along, then you know that the first 4 games were quite the roller coaster. Ian won the first 2 games, and I was able to mount improbable comebacks in both Games 3 and 4 from a position where my winning percentage was around 20% or less to force this decisive Game 5. So, would one of us be able to run away with Game 5, or would it prove to be yet another dramatic and thrilling game? Well, most of you guys probably already know the answer. It was possibly the craziest and most chaotic Scrabble game I've ever played in my life. And I say that not just because of the stakes. Again, this is by far and away the most important Scrabble game either myself or Ian had ever played in our lives. A national championship title was on the line, and this single game would decide it. So, about as important a game as it gets. But even if you take that out, this is truly one of the most remarkable games you'll ever see, and I think after you guys get through this video, you will understand why. So, let's go ahead and jump right in. I was first, and this is the exact kind of opening rack I wanted to see. Lots of easy bingos available, and thankfully I don't have to think too hard to start off this decisive and stressful Game 5. The one thing I want to not do here is spend a large amount of time deciding between my 10 plus bingos I have available on this turn. I went with Beavers for 72 points, which looks reasonable. It doesn't put any vowels next to the double letter scores, and it also doesn't put an S on the center star, which could give back large counter bingos to the triple word score. So, you can quibble about whether this is better than some other options, but I think it's reasonable enough, and I spent only about 20 seconds here, which, as we'll see later, proved critical in order to save my time for more complicated and important positions down the road. So, a good start for me. Ian has a decent rack to respond. He'd need a C for the word falchion, but I didn't give one to him. So he has a decision to make here between playing off his F and his H with a short play, such as Foe for 22 points, next to the B and E in Beavers, or playing longer and going for more turnover with something like Fashion through the S in Beavers. Both of these plays are reasonable. Ian decided to play short here with Foe for 22, which I think makes a lot of sense. He's at an early deficit, so he wants to try to prioritize bingoing quickly to get back into the game. AILN is a pretty good bingo lead, especially with an E and an S open to work with in Beavers. If he blows up his rack completely, keeping just an L, he's considerably less likely to bingo on his next turn. And generally when you're down, playing shorter does make some sense also, just to slow down the game a little bit. If the game moves along too quickly, you might run out of time to come back. So I think this is a wise decision on Ian's part. He's down 50 points, but he's definitely not done yet. And I drew another great rack after my opening bingo. I have 2 playable bingos here. I have Paranoid for 65 and Diapason for 69. Diapason is the clear favorite here. Not only is it 4 more points, but Paranoid gives back a gigantic scoring spot on the 8 row above the I and the D. If Ian has a high-scoring tile that goes above the I, such as the K, or maybe even worse, the Q, and is able to play horizontally to the triple, he's going to get a boatload of points. I definitely don't want to allow that, so Diapason, definitely the better choice here, and I take a 141 to 22 lead, 119 points, my biggest lead of any game in the series yet. But, like I said, Ian is definitely not going to go down easily. He gets the exact draw he needs after Foe. He's got several bingos available on this rack. He plays Nailers and Diapasons. This looks to be his best play. He's got 3 76-point bingos in that spot. He could also play Aligners or Renails. Aligners definitely doesn't look good because it puts that A next to the double word score and allows some significant comebacks down the L column, more so than Nailers or Renails would. I think it's pretty close between Nailers and Renails, so I think I made the right call here, just playing something quickly. Again, kind of like I said with Beavers, the difference is minor enough that it's more important to get the play down here quickly and save your time for analyzing more important, complicated, and high-stakes positions down the road as we get towards the conclusion of this game. So with that, Ian gets himself back to within 43 points. And this right here, guys, was another very pivotal turn of this game, and of this match as a whole. Holding a 43-point lead and a rack of AEENTVY, I quickly generated what appeared to be my 2 strongest options by far. The highest scoring play I have is Event from the Ian Nailers, scoring 36 points and holding AEY, and another strong option is the more defensive Veiny for 30 points through the Ian Diapasons, holding AET. 6 points extra is nice, but I was a little concerned about this play for a couple of reasons. Number 1, the AEY leave is not terrible, but since the Y can kind of function more as a vowel, I was worried about running into vowel trouble on my next turn. Number 2, this blows the board open for bingo opportunities for Ian when I have a lead. In addition to leaving the floating DIA and diapasons open, I now give Ian E and T to work with on the right. All of these are extremely potent floaters for Ian to work with to play 8-letter bingos, and I really wasn't dying to do that. Vaney does score 6 fewer points, but it keeps a better leave in AET and locks up the left-hand side of the board super effectively, since the V makes no 2-letter words. Because of that, the V is a super useful tile in Scrabble when you're ahead if you're trying to play defense, since again, it cannot be overlapped on either side. The one drawback with this play is it does leave the E and nailers open for scoring. If Ian drew something like the X, he could easily have a word starting with EX, scoring over 60 points. I decided at this point he was more of a threat to have a high-scoring bingo after event than a high-scoring X play after Vaney, and that an X play which would score about 60 would still be a lot less than a lot of his bingos after event, which, depending on where they were, could score into the 80s or maybe even the 90s. So, taking all that into account, I decided to sacrifice 6 points and go with the more bingo defensive Vaney. For what it's worth, the computer simulation has the plays really close, but Vaney does seem to edge event out by a couple tenths of a percent. And this turned out to be a crucial decision for me, because Ian's next rack, as it so happens, was AELOPRZ. Had I not played Vaney on the previous turn, then Ian would have slapped down Polarize as a second consecutive bingo through the Ian diapasons for 90 points. And blocking that was obviously massive in terms of the ramifications for the rest of this game. However, Ian still scored a lot of points here with his Z, finding easily his best play of Zoiel for 54 points down the L column, using that spot I was talking about next to his bingo of Nailers before. And with that, Ian claws back to within 19. I'm now up 171 to 152. So a 110-point lead has now quickly turned into a sub-20-point lead. That just goes to show you how good of a fighter Ian is and how this game is never over till it's over. I drew a bit poorly after Vaney, pulling EUYN out of the bag, but Ian's Z does give me a nice counterplay with Zany for 48. I could also consider Zeta for 39, which does keep a slightly more balanced sleeve, but the U-Y combo is pretty unappealing, so I decided I would just take the 9 extra points, since while EEU is also not great, it's not that much worse than EUY, and 9 is a significant amount to give up. So I think Zany seems reasonable here. Ian drew 3 eyes after Zoiel, so definitely not what he wanted, and he has an interesting decision on his hands here. He could score 33 points with redips, completely blowing up his rack and keeping the extremely unappealing I combo together. He could also play Spiv for 27 to the V and Vaney, which also gets rid of his S and keeps 2 eyes, but at least it keeps the D and the R to offset the eyes a little bit, and also creates a really nice bingo line for him down the A column, which is not only easy to hit, a ton of 8-letter words of course end in an S, since they're just plurals of 7-letter words, but also will be high scoring as it would reach the triple word score in the top left corner of the board. So, being down, this is the kind of volatility that could be in Ian's best interest to create. However, Ian does neither of these things. He plays Irid for 9 points through the R and Nailers, a big point sacrifice, but really cleans up his rack nicely, keeping the balanced IPRS sleeve, and also creating an S hook for Irids, which he can hopefully use for a bingo in the near or immediate future. It's really close. I think I agree with Ian's choice here. If he blows up his rack with either Redips or Spiv, he gets closer in score, but he's still going to be trailing around 30 points and a tempo, and keeping 2 eyes on your rack in that position is not that promising. I think I like this play. With so many strong bingo tiles left, 7 E's and all 6 T's, this leave is likely to turn into a bingo fairly quickly, and if Ian can get one down in the next turn or two, he'll be right back into this game. So I agree with his decision here. I think this was a very smart play. But I am still up about 50 points, facing a rack of EELMTUU. My priority here was definitely getting rid of at least one of my 2 U's, especially I see none of the U's have been played yet. There are still 2 more U's in the bag, and I definitely don't want to be stuck with 2 or even worse, 3 U's on my rack going forward. I played Emu for 18 points above the D and Irid. This looks like a good play here. It cleans up my rack pretty well. It doesn't score a ton, but there's really no good way for me to score much more than this on this board with this particular rack. And it blocks a lot, because Emu not only stops plays down the end column hooking Irids that I figured Ian might be going for, it also stops potentially huge scoring plays across the 8 row from the E and Nailers. If, say, Ian picked up an X after Irid, then a play like Hexing would be absolutely massive across the A row, scoring nearly 100 points and propelling Ian back into the lead. So Emu takes away not only huge scoring plays, but also bingos. I was definitely happy with this decision, and everybody seemed to agree with it. Ian did indeed draw the X. He wouldn't have had something quite like hexing, but he definitely would have scored well in that spot, so Emu certainly paid off. And here, Ian made, I think, a little bit of a misstep. He played Pox for 21 points through the O in Zoiel. He could have played the bizarre-looking M-Pox for 30 points. This is a new addition to the dictionary. It was just added earlier this year, so I'm not sure if Ian missed this or if he didn't like putting the M there to open up space on row 1. I think this is a better play, though, just because it's 9 more points, and DIMRS after Pox is a little bit too clunky. There's no guarantee after a play like Emu I'm going to hit the top row that hard, and being down, I think Ian needs the volatility and the better leave and bingo chances. So I do think M-Pox would have been a little bit of a better play. It's possible that Ian missed it. As you guys will see, this is not going to be the last time one of us missed a new word this game. That will be a recurring theme. So totally understandable here that he didn't see it. It's a very strange word to see, especially we've only gotten about 3 or 4 months to get used to being able to see it over the board. So Ian goes with Pox here for 21, and I hold on to a 45-point lead. This actually turned out to be a critical decision, though, because had Ian played M-Pox in that spot, he unknowingly would have given me a spot for Eurolite on the top row for nearly 80 points, which would have really put me in a commanding position this game and made it almost impossible for Ian to come back. So, may have been a mistake, may have been intentional. I think it was most likely a mistake, but in any case, it worked out very well for Ian in this particular instance. And now I had an interesting decision here. I have Eurolite, but it doesn't play. I could try to play short with something like Duel for 17 points, keeping EIRT, but I didn't feel that EIRT was a super strong leave on this board because bingo lines are dwindling quickly. Like I said, the V in Veiny makes it very hard to access the top left part of the board for bingos because there are no 2-letter words with the V. And in terms of 8-letter bingos, there's the P in diapasons, which is not very easy to play through, and also the U in Emu, which is not the best floater. So EIRT didn't actually feel like that great a leave. Duel would also create an S-hook for duels that could become extremely annoying for me to deal with in the long run with 2 more S's unseen, and I'm still operating under the assumption back from Ian's Irid play a couple turns earlier that most likely was an S setup, so I didn't want to do this. I found a really nice play along the 8 row, the disconnected Illuviate through the V and the E for 33 points. Now, I didn't love that this opened the left side of the board, in particular the E on the A column, which is a very useful bingo tile for Ian, especially after a play like Pox, which suggests that Ian is fairly high on consonants. The last thing that I want to do, if I can help it, is give him an E to work with. The problem is, like I said before, my other plays, like Duel, were even more unappetizing. It would be a huge point sacrifice. Another nice thing about Illuviate is I turn over a lot of tiles. I give myself a great chance to get the other blank, or some scoring tiles, or maybe the remaining S that I think might still be in the bag and not on Ian's rack. And if Ian doesn't hit the E immediately on this turn, I figured I should be able to shut it down and really take command on my next move. So definitely this move has some drawbacks, but I think it's simply too many points and too good otherwise to forego, and the computer analysis agrees. I go up almost 90 points with this play, and Ian has a poor draw after Pox pulling the Q. But he does have a good way to get rid of it, and he plays very quickly, just Chi for 31 points. This is easily his best play. He's got to get rid of this Q ASAP, and being able to do it for 31 points, keeping a pretty good 6-tile lead, especially with an E to work with, makes a ton of sense. So Ian able to get this down quickly, which is key because we're both already getting a little bit low on time, struggling with some of these complicated turns, and we need to make sure we save some time for the end. And right here, guys, is another pivotal turn for me. I have A-E-E-R-T and then 2 W's. I have a 7-letter word on this rack of wetware, which I saw but it doesn't play, and I have a bunch of choices. I didn't spot my best equity play by a good margin, and probably my best play overall in this position. Ew under Axe for 32 points on the 3 row. This scores well and keeps the nice balanced leave of water on my rack for the next turn. What it doesn't do well, though, is play defense. I'm still worried about Ian bingoing for a lot of points through the E and Illuviate, and this does nothing to address that threat. I figured at this point in the game, I'm up a lot of points, and that E is by far and away the most significant threat for Ian to bingo. After his last couple of plays, again, I still think he's got the S after Irid, a lot of consonants after Pox, and given how quickly he slapped in the Q with Chi, I think he's probably pretty close to a bingo. So I feel like there is some urgency to address that threat. And as such, I consider it a play that's pretty bad on the equity spectrum, but is very good on the defensive spectrum, namely where for 20 points, nestling under the E, L, and U of Alluviate to the E in Veiny. This doesn't score nearly as well as U, but it's super effective defensively, almost completely locking down the entire top left part of the board. The leave is also worse. EETW is not a terrible leave, but it's certainly not as well balanced as the leave of water after U, and could land me in E or T trouble on my next turn if I get a bad draw. So there's definitely some downside to this play. Another option I considered was Wanter for 31 points through the N in Veiny. This partially blocks the E in Alluviate, at least for bingos starting with the E, but I was still more concerned about bingos ending with an E, because a lot more 8-letter words end in an E than start with an E, and I do absolutely nothing to address that possibility. Wanter also creates a new line for 7-letter bingos on row 12, overlapping PE and AR that could be very useful to Ian, so I really didn't want to create that long-term board liability. And as such, I went with the hyper-defensive Where, which is definitely a bit of a stylistic diversion from how I typically play Scrabble. I tend to not play this defensively. I've gotten more defensive over the years. I used to play extremely open and aggressively when I was much younger and starting out in my tournament Scrabble career. I've gotten a little bit more balanced over the years, but this is a play I think I only would have made in probably the last year, if I'm being perfectly honest. I do still think I would have played EEW if I'd seen it. Like I said, I unfortunately did not see this option. It's just too much better in terms of points and leave. It's 12 more points and it keeps a better leave. That is a lot to give up. And while Where is really nice defensively right now, as we'll see based on Ian's next play, there's still some potential for this board to be reopened. He does have the U to work with on the right, but it's relatively tough to play through a U compared to an E, so I wasn't so much worried about that. But I think Ian's next play really illustrates why you have to be very careful when you're sacrificing a lot of points to play defensively, because depending on what's unseen, there's often a lot of danger for the board to be effectively reopened. I will say just one general comment, though, about this play I did mention as well in my post-match interview with the commentators. I think this play was largely influenced by the way I've seen Best Bot play in my Best of 100 series. I played against it as well as the Rematch series, which I'm currently playing. I'm getting smacked, by the way, there, so definitely check that out if you want to see me lose some games. But in any case, I've seen Best Bot make some extremely defensive and committal plays when it has a sizable lead on a board that feels very shut. And this board, to me, after Where, was starting to feel very shut. I figured if Ian didn't hit the U immediately, which was fairly unlikely, I could block that and then really take a stranglehold on this board and more or less coast to a victory. That being said, what I think I needed to do a little bit better in this position was foresee other options for Ian to reopen the board. I shouldn't have assumed he was going to just play passively if he couldn't hit the U. And I landed into a little bit of a difficult situation, as we'll see on the next turn after this. So I do believe this was a mistake. I think it has a lot of merit, but it was probably a little bit too early and too big a sacrifice to justify this play. I think the general consensus among the commentators and top players who are watching this was the same. It was a good idea in principle, but just a little bit too far in this particular situation. So let's see what happened next. Ian made an absolutely fantastic play here with a rack of CDIMORS. His highest scoring play is to play OM and MPOX in that spot he presumably didn't see before, but he makes a far better play, Mock, for 21 points next to the Y in Veiny. Why is this play so good? Well, Ian's down almost 80 points, and the board is quickly dying after my play of Where. He needs to make something happen, and quickly. This play very nicely sets up his S on the 15 row for bingos hooking Mocks, which will also score a lot of points as they'll reach one of the triple word scores. There is another S unseen as well as the K for Mock, but with only 2 such hooks unseen out of a bag with 32 tiles in it, it's relatively unlikely that I'm going to have one of these 2 tiles. And it's very annoying for me to block this effectively if I don't have one of these tiles, because the C, which is normally thought of as a great defensive tile in Scrabble, by virtue of not making any 2 other words, can also be a great offensive tile because it makes overlapping impossible and thus playing defense impossible. So the irony is very strong here. Like I said, the C usually a good defensive tile, but here it's a good defensive tile in the sense of defending against me playing defense, because now I am unable to play down the B column next to the O and the C, which would be the ideal play for me, scoring pretty well and effectively blocking the hook. Again, no two other words with a C, I cannot do that. So if I don't have an S or a K, then really my only blocking option would be to play horizontally through this C. But if I do that, I'm likely giving a lot of counterplay back on row 15 to Ian. So I likely wouldn't want to do that either, and thus, if I don't have the S or the K, I may be forced to just leave this open. So this is a fantastic play for Ian. I think one of his best plays of the series, honestly. He's had a rough game the whole way. He was down 2 bingos to start, clawed his way back, and this is just an awesome way to try to force his way back into the game. So kudos to him for finding this play and really forcing me to think hard on my next turn and for the rest of this game. And now we see the problem with my play of Where on the last turn. I drew poorly to my EETW leave, pulling another T as well as the clunky U and G, and now I have very little to do by way of blocking Ian's setup on his last turn. Of course, I was completely aware of what Ian was up to. There's no way he's going to do that without holding an S on his rack. The problem is, there's really nothing I can do about it. Like I said, I can't play to the left of the O and the C because there are no two other words with a C, and playing through the C gives me extremely limited options. If I play something like Tech for 10, then number one, it's only partially a block. Ian can still start with an S and bingo with Mox, and number two, this is such a big equity sacrifice. I'm only scoring 10 points, and I'm keeping GUW on my rack. This is going way too far, and now if I do this and Ian bingos, I am in huge trouble. Playing a word starting with the C doesn't look much better. If I try to do something like cute, I'm still only scoring 8 points, and I'm giving back huge counterplay on the 15 row below the E, so I don't really want to do this either. I decided here I needed to try to just score points, clean up my rack, and hope that Ian at least didn't hit a bingo with Mox for one more turn. As such, I played wedded to the ED for 20 points, keeping EGU. I once again missed my highest scoring option of U for 32 points under Axe. Here I think it's less clear-cut than before that this is the best play though. Because yes, I score 12 more points, but I keep a much worse leave. EGTTU is much clunkier than EGU, and turnover is key here. Because I want an S or the K as quickly as possible so that if Ian is unable to use his setup on this turn, I have a way to effectively block it on my next turn. So to me, it's worth it to give up the 12 points for the extra shots at the S or the K, or at least just a more well-balanced rack in general that will leave me more flexibility to block. So in this position, I do believe I made the right play here, but all of my options are very awkward, and I really have to hope that Ian doesn't smack me with a huge scoring bingo on row 15 on his next turn. Now, the good news for me is that with Ian's draw here, a rack of DGINORS, he doesn't have a 7-letter word with the S on row 15. But the bad news is he still does have a bingo, and he finds it, Cordings for 68 points from the C and Mock. When this came down, I actually was not all that disappointed, because while Ian did bingo, I at least managed to dodge a 90-plus point bingo with Mox, and this did give me some counterplay. So I figured here, alright, he bingoed, which is not great, but I'm still up 8 points, and it's my turn. Things are still looking not so bad. I didn't draw well, though, after wedded, pulling a V out of the bag, and now I've got the dreaded VU combo along with some other clunky tiles. My play here felt fairly forced, Vino for 33 points through the N in Cordings. I just can't really score anywhere near this amount anywhere else on the board, and with a J and a K still unseen, I was really worried that after drawing 7 tiles, Ian could have pulled something like Jink down the H column for a massive, possibly game-ending number of points. So this felt more or less forced to score well, clean up the rack a little bit, and take out that spot. It doesn't really look like there's much else to consider. So with this play, I still have a 41-point lead. However, it would be short-lived as Ian drew the other blank out of the bag. BGINOT blank makes 2 playable bingos here, both of which are through the U and Emu. He finds Doubting for 61 points. The other one is Bolting. They're positionally more or less identical. Doubting is perfectly reasonable. He plays this quickly as he should, and he takes his first lead of the entire game, going up by 20, 363 to 343. And right here, guys, begins one of the most complicated, intense, and memorable sequences of Scrabble turns you'll ever see. Before I jump into the actual plays, let's just take a step back and remind ourselves what's at stake here. Remember, this is the decisive Game 5 in our best-of-5 finals match. So this is the last game of Scrabble, no matter what, for both me and Ian at the 2024 Scrabble Players Championship. If I win this game, I win the title, If Ian wins this game, Ian wins the title. That's it. So everything, all the marbles are on the line here. Ian and I have both been playing lights out up to this point, both during the tournament and during the final series. Sure, a couple small mistakes here and there, but we are human, and considering the circumstances and everything, we've both been playing some of the best Scrabble we each could have reasonably hoped for. We're also both vying for our first ever championship. Both Ian and I have finished runner-up before, but we've never won the title, so we both have a lot to play for here. And we're both getting low on time. At this point in the game, we both probably had somewhere around 5 or 6 minutes to play the rest of this game. And while we are down to 8 tiles in the bag, so the game is coming to a conclusion, these are going to be some of the most complicated turns you'll ever see, and as you will soon realize, time played a huge factor for both of us going towards the end of this game, and this will once again illustrate why, as I always talk about in my videos, and like I talked about earlier in this game with plays like Beavers and Nailers, it's so important not to waste unnecessary time at the beginning of the game. Having an extra minute or two to plod through some of these insanely complicated, and I might also add super high stakes and important decisions towards the end of the game, is so vital, much more vital than quibbling over a minor decision early in the game. So, like I said, Ian and I both managed our time, I think, fairly well this game. We both had about 6 minutes left, which is not unreasonable, but we both could have used a heck of a lot more. So, with all that in mind, let's jump in. My turn in this position, Ian just bingoed. I'm down 20 points, 8 in the bag. ACEGRSU. All things considered, a fantastic draw after my last play of Vino, which you may recall kept CEGU. I'm obviously super happy to see the S. The last S in the game, and something that could be very important for trying to hook Mack to make Mocks and score on the bottom left. So the first play I saw that seemed worth considering was playing there immediately with Case for 32 points. This would put me back in the lead by 12, but I didn't like where this was going, because GRU is not a good leave. It's fairly clunky, there's another U left, it's not good for scoring, and it leaves 4 in the bag. I figured leaving 4 in the bag, Ian would probably play like 2 or 3 tiles, not empty the bag, and then I would be in an extremely awkward position, probably down a couple of points, trying to time the endgame correctly. It didn't look promising. So I thought about this, but I figured I needed to go for something a little bit more creative and aggressive. I noticed that the K was the key tile in this position, because having the K would enable either of us to hook Mack to make Mack and score a large amount of points, possibly a game-ending amount of points in the bottom left corner. I also knew that if I, in particular, could draw the K with this rack, I could play Cask, making Mocks and OK for over 60 points, which almost certainly would end the game on the spot given the score and the state of this board. The H would also be a very good tile for me, since if I managed to draw that but miss the K, I could still play Cash, which would be over 50. So, with that in mind, I thought, okay, what if I keep ACS on my rack to go for Cash or Cask, pray that either I draw the K, or that I miss the K, draw the H, and that Ian doesn't have the K. I figured if Ian has the K, I'm sunk, because he's going to score 30 plus points over there, and it's going to be really hard for me to come back. So if I'm going all in on drawing the K, I figured I might as well give myself as many chances as I can to get it. Like I said, I need to keep ACS to go for Cask or Cash. If I don't keep those 3 letters, then the K doesn't do me that much good. So I want to get rid of EGRU to keep ACS, and that is what I did, playing Urge for 12 points above the S in Chordings. Again, the idea here is really going all out, hoping to draw that K for Cask, or if I miss the K, hoping to at least draw the H for Cash, and that Ian doesn't have the K himself and isn't able to block there while scoring effectively. So it's a really interesting idea. Now, it has a lot of drawbacks, though, obviously. Drawback number 1. It only scores 12 points. I am down 20 points in this position, so I'm still going to be down 8 plus whatever Ian scores on his next turn. Drawback number 2, if Ian has the K, I'm probably dead on the spot. I was fully aware of this, but that was a risk I was willing to take, because, like I said, basically anything I do in this position that doesn't immediately play with Mack will have the same drawback. If I leave that spot open and Ian has the K and scores 40 points, he's going to be taking a lead that on this tight a board is insurmountable. And like I said before, really my only viable option down there, Case, didn't appeal to me, because while I do take a 12-point lead, I leave Ian a lot of flexibility with 4 in the bag to control the endgame timing, and GRU is just not a good leave. So I really didn't like this, and I figured that I had a better chance at going for the K or the H after Urge. It's also worth keeping in mind, Ian just bingoed, so he drew 7 tiles out of a bag that, when he bingoed, had 15 tiles in it. 8 in the bag now means that there were 15 tiles prior to him drawing his 7. So that means there was a 7 in 15, or just under 50% chance that he drew the K. So in theory, I have about a 50% chance of at least Ian not having drawn the K. And if he didn't draw the K, then I've got a 50% chance myself of drawing it, because with 8 in the bag, I'm giving myself 4 chances with Urge to draw the K. So, again, not amazing chances, but it has a decent enough chance of working, and I felt this was still a better chance than Case gave me in the bottom left of winning, regardless of whether or not I drew the K. Very hard to know exactly, but that's just what my intuition told me in this position, and that's what I went with. Now, I did unfortunately miss another really strong option on this play with Urge. I could play the word guac for 22 points next to the letters in Doubting, setting up an S-hook with guacs on the triple on the bottom. Now, this has an eerily similar theme to Ian's play of Mock earlier, in that the C is actually a super useful offensive tile, because this S-hook is nearly impossible for Ian to block if he doesn't have a hook himself, because he can't play down the M column hooking Ag and the C, since as before, there are no 2 other words with a C. Now you might be thinking, well, there are no S's left. I have the last S, so how does Ian block it all? Well, guac actually takes an O for guaco in addition to an S, and there is one O unseen. So if Ian has that O, he could easily have a play like Jot down there, scoring 40 points, blocking, and really putting me in a tough position. Interestingly, the odds that Ian has the O are the exact same as the odds that Ian has the K, like we were talking about before. There's one O in the bag, just like there's one K. So having drawn 7 tiles out of 15, he had a 7 in 15, or again, just below 50% chance of pulling the O after Doubting. Now, I think the key difference here, though, is that if Ian has the O after guac, I still have some decent chances. It's more or less an even game after guac. I go up 2. Even if Ian scores like 30 there, I still have the S for mocks. And now, if I can draw a key tile, in particular the H, I'm going to be scoring a lot in the bottom left corner with Resh, which will be close to 50 points. And that very well could be enough to outrun big O plays with guaco for Ian. So, if Ian has the O here, I'm probably in a weak position, but certainly not in a terrible position. The key difference is after my play of Urge, if I don't have the K, and in particular if Ian has the K, I am in deep, deep trouble. Because now, Urge doesn't set anything else up for me on the right-hand side of the board. If Ian scores 30 or 40 with the K after Mock, I am basically dead. That's the key difference here. After guac, if Ian has the key tile, in this case the O, then I am far from dead. If Ian has the key tile, the K, after Urge, I am dead. Now, he could also score a lot with the K after guac, with Mock on the bottom left. But if he does that, then I have a lot of outs too with guac's plays. I could even draw something like Jest, if I draw a J and a T for over 60 points, which probably outruns any K plays convincingly. So that's the nice thing about guac. It does give Ian 2 potential key tiles now, the K and the O. Whereas after Urge, his key tile is pretty much just the K. But after guac, if he has either of those key tiles, I have an out to still outrun him in the other spot. And if he doesn't have either the K or the O after guac, it's pretty much game over, because I'm going to have first dibs at both of those scoring spots, and there's going to be very little, if anything, he can do about them. So, how do you evaluate this, guac versus Urge? It's really, really tough and really, really fascinating. Once I was informed after the game about the possibility of guac, my instinct was, oh, I definitely should have played this, because if he doesn't have the O, he's basically completely dead since he can't block it. And I do still believe guac is a better play. Like I said, there is just so much upside with this. And the key thing, as I said before, is it's not as committal a play. If Ian hits either of the spots, I am not out of it yet. I can still go for a big play in the other spot. Urge is a 100% committal play. I am conceding more or less that if Ian has the K, he will win this game. And I just don't feel I need to do that yet. Guac also scores 10 more points, keeping me more in the game and keeping more scoring pressure on Ian. So I do believe that this is the better play. And computer simulation does agree, though not by a massive margin. If I sim this for a while with Macondo, it has Guac at around 40% to win and Urge at around 33% to win. So that's a pretty significant difference. But it's not a gigantic difference like a lot of folks thought it would be. So I think the conclusion here, guys, Guac would have likely been a better play, but not a staggeringly better play like at first I initially thought it might be. But in any case, a super fascinating turn here. I will say, I think Urge absolutely shocked the majority of the viewers as well as the commentators. Nobody found this coming. So even though Guac was likely a better play, I'm at least very proud of this idea I came up with. It's super counterintuitive to fish for a K. Normally the K is a bit of a clunky tile, but I was really happy I was able to at least recognize the value of the K in this position, both in terms of needing Ian not to have it and the additional value I would get from drawing it. So really, really clever idea here. Was it actually correct? I don't think so. Was it interesting? And did it create a lot of complications and chaos? Absolutely yes. So, enough on this turn for now. Let's move on to the next turn. Ian's rack. D-E-F-I-L-T-T. I just played Urge. Ian is still up 8 points. Now, Ian made a fantastic play here, and he made it quickly, which, like I said, was key to save time. Almost immediately, he played FE for 20 points on the 15 row. Why is this such a good play? After all, D-I-L-T-T is a really bad-looking leave. Well, the reason this is such a good play is look at the unseen tile pool from Ian's perspective. So much can go wrong on the bottom left corner of the board. Both the K for Mock and the S for Mocks are unseen. There's also an H and a J. So many plays there are just game-ending on the spot. Joke or Juke, Cask, Josh, all of these plays score over 60 points, and that is going to end the game immediately. Ian will have no way of coming back. So Ian absolutely has to address that threat, and his play does it fantastically. Would it be nice for him to keep another Val? Absolutely. But is it nice for him to score 20 points and take a 28-point lead on this dead board? Absolutely. And with 5 Vals still unseen, if he can draw at least one of them, he's going to have a decent amount of flexibility going into this endgame. So this was, I also think, one of Ian's clutchest plays of the entire series, in a series where he made a bunch of great plays. So kudos to Ian on recognizing what I was up to with Urge, recognizing this threat, and realizing, not only realizing quickly that he needed to address it. This was a key play. He absolutely had to make this play to stay in this game. And this play was a big blow and shock to me, as I drew not only the K, but also the H after Urge, and I was very prepared to slap down Cask for 60 and more or less put the kibosh on this game. But now I needed to regroup. And I spent a long time on Urge. I'm probably down to 3 to 4 minutes at this point. And now I'm looking at a 28-point deficit with a pool unseen that's very hard to pin down. It's not great, but it's not terrible. A lot of flexible low point tiles, and also the 8-point J is going to be pivotal. Now, the first question I had to ask myself is, do I want to play short here, or do I want to play long? I quickly narrowed this play down to 2 options. One of them, dropping the K for 22 points, leaving the super potent ACEHRS leave, and leaving uncertainty for Ian. Because by dropping the K, I leave a tile in the bag, and Ian is not going to know what I have on my rack. So that could severely complicate his decision and planning. My other option, though, was playing Escar for 45 points on the bottom right, emptying the bag and keeping the K. These were the 2 plays I was waffling between, and I knew I had to make a decision quickly. Escar obviously scores a lot more points. Scoring 45 points puts me up 17, which is a significant amount on this dead of a board. However, I had a lot of concerns about making this play. I was particularly worried that if I drew the J and another consonant, I was going to be J-stuck and lose the game. For instance, let's say I draw JT after playing Escar. Then I'm only going to have one J spot on this board, namely playing Joe to the O in Mock. Ian will realize this, he will block that spot, I will be J-stuck for the rest of the game, and Ian will hold on to win the game and the title fairly convincingly. So that was a major concern. I also was just worried in general that I'm drawing 2 tiles, which means I only have 3 tiles, But given one of them is going to be the K, even if I don't draw the J, I might not be able to play out on my next turn, and if Ian is able to get 2 more turns, he might just be able to outscore me. It was very hard, if not impossible, to calculate this precisely. And as it turns out, I put this into the Macondo engine, and playing Escar immediately would have won 25 out of 36 times, which is just shy of 70%. That, admittedly, is a number that's higher than what I probably would have estimated during the game. I looked at this play briefly, and I was like, I probably win maybe half the time. If I draw the J, I'm probably in big trouble regardless. I'm going to talk about this more after I go over the conclusion of the game, since there is so much to unpack here, and I want to get to that first. But as we'll see, my intuition was partially correct, but also partially off. Instead of Escar, I opted to drop my K for 22 points. And like I said, I had about 3 or 4 minutes, and my instinct told me if I play Escar, I might win, but I could also land in a good deal of trouble. And if I do this, then it really complicates the game for Ian, because I am still threatening Escar on my next play. And I figured that if Ian didn't block it with his next play, I was going to be in very good shape, especially if I didn't draw the J. I felt confident in this position that if I managed to draw something other than the J on my 1-tile pool, I would win. Because then, if I got Escar down, I would be able to go out on my subsequent turn with whatever my 1 remaining tile was, and I would win the game pretty easily. And it didn't seem that easy for Ian to block Escar while playing the J. Plays such as Jig or Jug to the G and Urge would be his most logical plays if he were to have the J, and those would leave Escar open, again opening the door for me to do that and then go out on the subsequent turn and win the game. I also figured if Ian did block Escar, it would be very hard for him to do that while also playing the J. Plays like Legit through the G and Urge score a bit, but would likely leave Ian the J on his rack, and with me having a much more flexible rack, I figured most likely I would be able to outmaneuver him if something like that happened. So my instincts told me that if I dropped the K, I was mostly guaranteed to win this game if I did not pull the J on my 1-tile pool. Now, was this correct? Maybe. Like I said, I'm going to come back to this in a little bit, so don't go anywhere, but I want to talk first about the remainder of this game. So, like I said, I played KI, cutting the deficit to 6, and now Ian had DEILOTT. This is another absolutely mind-boggling position, and Ian spent the vast majority of his remaining time on this position, as he was absolutely justified in doing. Ian had, I believe, around 5 minutes going into this position, and this is the most important turn of the match so far. Ian's in a really tough spot, and again, the key tile he needs to watch out for is the J. The real question for Ian here is, did I have the J when I just dropped the K? I think the answer is most likely no, because the J is more of a liability than an asset on this board. There's nowhere great to score with it, and it could prove difficult and inflexible to get rid of. So Ian should probably assume that if I had the J, I would have played it immediately while I still could, and then saved the K for a play there on my next turn. I think that's a fairly reasonable assumption to make. So what does that mean? Well, if I didn't have the J when I played KI, that means it was in the bag. There were 2 tiles in the bag when I played KI, meaning there is a 1 in 2 or 50-50 shot I picked it up after KI. That also means there's a 50-50 shot, it's still in the bag, and Ian is about to draw it after whatever he does on this turn. So Ian needs to balance not only the 50-50 shot that he draws the J, but also the 50-50 shot that I drew the J. So he needs to try, if he can, to simultaneously prepare to draw the J himself and leave himself an out if he draws it, and also prepare for the possibility that I drew the J and make sure he doesn't give me anything good with it on my turn. It's super, super tough to do both of those at once. And as it turns out, I'll also come back to this turn in a little bit more detail once I go over the conclusion of the game. Ian doesn't have a great play here. Ian really doesn't have any plays that give him a winning line if he draws the J. So Ian needs to more or less hope that the J is now on my rack. I'll explain a little bit more in detail why later, but it turns out Ian's best plays here are either old for 13 points under the G and E and Urge, or legit for 14 through the G. Both of these plays, according to the Macondo engine, win 5 out of 8 times. Ian played Tog to the G and Urge, which is not a bad play, and it's super complicated to see why, but it is inferior, winning 2.5 times. This wins with 2 draws and ties with 1 draw. Now, I will say this is effectively 3 wins for Ian, because if we happen to tie in this game, Ian wins the match in the title. It's 2-2 at this point, but Ian has a slightly positive point spread. So if somehow we were to tie and finish 2.5 to 2.5, then point spread would be the tiebreaker. So a tie is effectively a win for Ian here. That is something to keep in mind, and it will be relevant one more time in the endgame analysis. So keep that in mind. Tog is, because of that, effectively a 3 out of 8 for Ian. So again, not a bad play at all. However, as I'll talk about in more detail in a bit, he did have some 5 out of 8s. Again, almost impossible to figure all this out in real time under this kind of time pressure. All of the endgames are super, super complicated. But in any case, Tog was the move for Ian. He takes a 14-point lead, and now I'm in this position. I drew the dreaded J after KI. So this was exactly what I feared, and I was definitely starting to panic here. I'm feeling the time pressure. I'm down to about 2 minutes, maybe even a little bit less at this point, after having spent so much time on Urge and KI. And I was like, as long as I don't draw the J, I should be winning. And of course, I drew the J. So I had to completely regroup here, and I was trying to plan ahead for Ian's turn when he played Tog, but I couldn't really plan ahead because I didn't know what he was going to do. I saw Tog as a possibility. I expected maybe something longer like legit. It was so hard to predict, and all these endgames were so complicated, it was really, really hard to plan. The first possibility I considered and quickly disposed of was playing Eskar immediately. This does score 45 points and would give me a 31-point lead, but I'm J-stuck after this, because I only have one J-spot, namely next to the O in Mock. And all Ian would need to do is drop a tile next to that O, block that spot, and then I'm J-stuck. He can just take his time, play off one tile at a time, and it's not hard to see he's going to win easily. Interestingly, there are 2 J-spots on the board before Eskar. In addition to J-O, I can play J-U-S over here for 10, but Eskar blocks that, as J-U-S-E is not a valid word. So that option was out. The next play I saw was reversing the order of these plays. Joe for 9 first, hoping to play Eskar on my next turn. Whenever you see an interesting 2-turn sequence, but it doesn't work in one order, like I said, Eskar first, not working because I can get J-stuck, it's always good to consider the other way around. What if I play Joe first? Well, now, if I get Eskar down on my next turn, I'm surely going to be winning the game, but of course, Ian can block. And Ian has a number of ways to block, but a number of them appear to have problems and not win him the game. I'll talk about this more in a minute. But first, I want to talk about another option I considered, namely Haji to the I and Alluviate. This scores really well, getting 28 points, which would bring me to a 14-point lead. And I was very close to playing this. I actually had this laid down on the board with about 30 seconds on my clock, and I looked at it for a little bit, and at first it seemed very promising, because the key idea here is I'm threatening to go out with Rex and SH on my next play. And it's a little bit difficult for Ian to deal with, because if he plays to the right of Haji, with something like tiled or looted down the F column scoring a lot of points, Rex will still play making she. So at first I was like, okay, this is actually surprisingly annoying for Ian to block. But then I realized he could play to the left of Haji down the D column with something like Lud, L-U-D, or lied. And after that, I'm not going to have a place to go out, and it could be difficult for me to play my C. Again, I'm down to under a minute at this point. I don't have time to calculate all of this precisely, but it seemed like this would likely result in a win for Ian. I also knew that Ian was down to around 2 minutes or less on his own clock at this point, and he was going to be doing his best to plan for what I might do on my next turn. I figured Haji was the most likely play he would be anticipating since it seemed the most logical. Scoring a lot, opening some more space for myself, and keeping an outplay on my next turn. So I figured that this was what Ian was planning for, and that he would realize he couldn't play on the right, and he would have to play on the left. As it turns out, this would have been a winning play for me. Like I said, I will explain this as well as everything else I've promised in more detail soon. But with about 15 seconds on my clock, I decided I didn't like this. I can't tell if I'm going to be able to hold on and win if Ian plays on the left. I want to create more chaos. I want to force him to figure out how to deal with my threat. I had Haji on the board. I picked it up with about 12 seconds on my clock, and in one of the most confusing and dramatic moments, I think, in Scrabble history, I picked it up and slapped on the J, declaring 9 points, hitting my clock with 11 seconds left, keeping Eskar on my rack and hoping that Ian would either miss it on his next turn or not be able to find an adequate block. Does this play win with optimal play from Ian? No, it does not. But it's very tricky for Ian to find a winning sequence on his next turn. Did I realize when I played Joe that Ian could block Eskar? Absolutely. Did I realize that he had a winning sequence to block it? I admittedly did not, but I also didn't have any time to calculate it. Haji didn't seem like a clear win to me. I couldn't find anything else that was a clear win. And because of all that, I figured my best bet, given that it's such a chaotic game, there's so much stress and pressure, both in terms of what's at stake and the time factor, that Joe made the situation as complicated as possible for Ian and also would be the play he was expecting the least. And that's part of why I decided to do it. Like I said, at this point, I had no idea if I was winning this game mathematically. I had no idea if I was going to win this game in practice. It was just absolute chaos, and there were about 60 different thoughts and ideas swarming through my head at this point for plays to make, and I can't exactly pinpoint or explain what happened in the final moment I decided to switch Haji to Joe, but like I said, I think the closest explanation is I just had an instinct that Haji wasn't going to win for some reason. Again, this turns out it was wrong. I'll explain why in a minute. I had an instinct that wasn't going to win. I also had some instinct that Joe probably wasn't a win with optimal play by Ian, but I also just felt like it was going to be harder for him to win in practice, assuming he did have wins. So that is why I ended up playing Joe for 9 points here, saving Eskar with about 11 seconds on my clock. It was now Ian's turn. He's up 5 with DEILTU. He has to block Eskar in this position if he wants to win the game. Eskar is 45 points. There is no way he's going to be able to outrun that. What I figured Ian was going to do was play the word edit with use for 9 points. And this to me seemed the most logical because it blocks Eskar and it saves a vowel and a consonant, an L and a U, and it looks like he should be able to go out on his next turn. This is what I was expecting Ian to play. And I had calculated while Ian was thinking that I would be able to win after this play. Let me show you why. If Ian plays edit, then from my perspective, he is threatening to go out in 2 different places. He can play love to the blank V in beavers and pool from the P in diapasons. But these are close enough on the board that I can stop them both simultaneously. And one way I could do that I saw during the game is to play the word harp for 9 points through the disconnected A and P. And I knew that this would win me the game. Why does this win? Well, Ian can't go out, and now I'm threatening to go out for a lot with aces and sharp on my next turn. Ian would have only one way to block this. He could drop his L next to the A in beavers with La for 2 points, but then I save a super high scoring play of Sack above Eluviate and Ware, scoring almost 30 points, and it's not hard to see that I would win this game easily as Ian won't score a lot going out with his U. So this I did correctly calculate. Edit would have lost for Ian. However, there were other options for Ian that we both missed when he could have played edit. Instead of edit, Ian can also block with etui in the same spot, scoring 8. This at first looks weird, because normally a vowel and a consonant is going to be more flexible and more prone to playing out on your next turn than keeping 2 consonants, especially on a congested board like this one. However, as it turns out, etui would have actually won this game for Ian, as with DL, he is threatening 2 outplays on completely different parts of the board. He can play lewd through the EW on the left, or he can play deli through the E and urge and the I and etui he just set up over here. I will be unable to block both of these plays. So after etui, there's really not much I can do. Ian's going out for 8 next turn, I can't stop him, and my best play would just be Archai for 20 to the Ian Alluviate, scoring as much as I can while getting rid of my C and my H. I'll leave you guys to check that after this, Ian goes out and would have won this game by a mere 5 points. There was one other winning play for Ian in this position with a similar idea of blocking Eskar. This one to me is a lot more counterintuitive and harder to see. It's DEIL through the Ian Urge for 8 points. This looks kind of scary because it gives me an L to work with now in the triple line. However, the key is that ETU is going out for Ian on his next turn. He has Etui for 8 now through the Ian Alluviate. And he also, if I decide to block that, has Tool through the L in DEIL that he just opened up over here. So if Ian were to do this, I would have no better option than to cash in on the bottom right with Hailer for 27 points. But then Ian plays Etui for 8, and then when all is said and done, he wins by 2, 415 to 413. So there were 2 ways in this position that Ian could have blocked my play in a way that also enabled him to win the game. Now, that being said, it's still extremely difficult to come up with either of Etui or DEIL under time pressure, even if Ian sees Eskar. There are a lot of ways he could consider blocking it, and to realize that those 2 are the only ones to win is very, very challenging. When you couple that with, like I said, all of the circumstances here, the time pressure, the immense stress of the situation, it is super, super hard to solve this endgame correctly and process everything that's going on. Unfortunately, Ian here didn't see the threat of Eskar and played PIU from the P in Diapasons, hoping to go out with Delta to either the A in Alluviate or the A in Beavers on his next turn. Of course, after this, I quickly played Eskar for 45 to go out, winning the game by a final score of 441 to 396 and clinching the title. Now, I want to be very clear, guys. This was a super, super hard endgame. Did Ian make a mistake when he played PIU in this position, missing Eskar? Yes, he did. Was it a mistake that a lot of other players in his same position would have made? I absolutely think so. You have to remember, guys, that this is not just a normal situation here. This is the highest stress situation both me and Ian have ever been in over a Scrabble board in our entire lives. This is it. This is Game 5. Whoever wins this game wins their first title. We're also both absolutely exhausted at this point. Remember, we just played 4 full days of Scrabble before this and have had 4 absolutely exhausting back and forth games in the final, and now we've both been banging our heads at trying to figure out some really brutal decisions all throughout this Game 5 and are now down to just about a minute left on our clocks and with so little mental energy. It's so difficult to process all the complexities of this position, even under normal circumstances, and these circumstances were about as far from normal as they could possibly be. So, definitely a costly mistake from Ian, but like I said, a completely understandable one. And I do want to say, and I mentioned this as well during my speech after I won the event, Ian could not have handled this better and with more class. And he was such a good sport despite what must have been one of the most difficult losses, if not the most difficult loss he's ever faced. So I know I've already mentioned this in my speech at the awards ceremony, but I wanted to say it here too, just so all my viewers, as well as everybody who's watching this knows, major kudos and thank you to Ian for being such a fantastic opponent both during and after this super intense and grueling best of 5 finals. I really have so much respect for how Ian handled himself during this match both on and off the board, and as I said in my speech, it really is a bit of a bummer that one of us had to lose because I think we both played so well and both would have been equally deserving of this title, but at the end of the day, somebody did have to win. That's just the way this game works. It happened to be me this case, but I know Ian's been at this game for longer than I've been alive, and that if he continues to play at this level, which I know we all fully expect and hope he will, I'm quite confident he's going to have another chance soon, and he will come out on top. So, Ian, if you're watching this, thank you again for being such a fantastic opponent, and I really do look forward to seeing you back here very soon. Now, with all that said, I still do want to go through the rest of the analysis on this endgame and this pre-endgame for you guys. And let's start with the position where I dropped my J for 9 points. Like I said, after this play, Ian has 2 wins. He can play either use an etui or deil through the e in urge. But instead of Joe, I had some winning options. One of them, as I mentioned before, was the initial play I considered of Haji for 28 points. If I play Haji, as I was mentioning before, Ian cannot do something like looted or tiled down the F column, as that would give me an outplay of Rex and She down the D column, which would be enough to win the game. So instead, Ian would have to do something like lied down the D column, stopping me from going out. And if he were to play this, then I would be sitting on CERS, down 4 points, with Ian holding TU and about to go out on his next turn. Now, this was the position I saw as I was calculating Haji, and I didn't like my chances here. I didn't have time to fully do the math. But it turns out, if I play Cedar through the DA for 16, which was the best play I saw, the game of all things would end in a tie. Because after Cedar, Ian with UT goes out with UT for 10 on the bottom right, and gets 2 additional points for my S, resulting in a 421 to 421 tie. As I mentioned earlier, if we were to have tied, Ian would have won the series and the title, because we were 2-2 at this point, and Ian had the advantage on spread. So, even if I was able to calculate all of this precisely, which, like I said, I wasn't, I just kind of estimated that it wasn't going to be enough, I would have realized that this was a tie and that I couldn't go into this line. However, I have a better play than Cedar in this position that's very sneaky and that I most certainly didn't see, and that would have won me this game. It's the 10-letter word of recordings on the bottom left part of the board, extending chordings covering a double word score. And this does keep the C on my rack, but it scores enough points that I'm going to win after Ian's next play. After recording, Ian, as before, is going to go out with UT for 10, but it's not going to be enough. I hold on to win by 6, 433 to 427. So, Haji would have been a win in the original position. However, it would have also necessitated that I see the recordings extension, which I certainly did not during the game. As it turns out, if I had played Haji and Ian had played something like Lithe, which I fully expect he would have, since, like I said, he was expecting me to play Haji and starting to calculate it, I would have probably played Cedar, and this game would have ended in a tie, and Ian would have won. So, it worked out for the best that I didn't play Haji. However, in this original position, I missed my standout best play here. I have one more play that forces a win, and it's a much more straightforward win than Haji to calculate. It's difficult to see, though, because it gets rid of my S while keeping the J on my rack. My best play here is to play Eschew to the EW on the left-hand side of the board for 15 points. The idea here is that I keep AJR on my rack, and I have 2 places to go out on my next turn. I have Raja to either A and Alluviate and Beavers. Ian can block both of those, but as a backup, I now have Jar down the B column, which I just set up making ER. And Ian cannot block all of those. So if I were to play this, then Ian's best play would be something like Lied down the B column, blocking my highest scoring outplay of Jar. But after this, I go out with either Raja for 13 points, and when all was said and done, I would have won by 5, 409 to 404. Note that horizontal plays from the S and S2 for Ian, like Suited, do appear to block all of my outs. However, they don't quite work, because Raja in this case would still fit under the E and the D with an overlap. There is no way in this position for Ian to stop me from going out on my next turn, and there is no way for him to score enough to outrun me, so S2 is a forced win. So, technically speaking, Ian and I did both make game-losing mistakes once we got to the endgame. My decision to play Joe was a game-losing mistake because Ian could have effectively blocked Eskar in a way that saved him outs and won him the game. Ian wasn't able to do that on his next turn, so that was also a game-losing mistake in return. And I will admit, guys, this fact did eat at me a little bit after I won the title. I really regretted that I wasn't able to finish this game in a clean fashion, especially just given the nature of the series so far and how precisely and spectacularly we'd both been playing. It really felt like a shame to me that this had to end with both of us making a mistake, and just so happening that Ian making the later of the 2 mistakes and the one that ultimately allowed me to play out and win the game. I really had a lot of regrets about not playing Eschew. Not even so much being mad at myself for missing it. Like, yeah, I have high standards for myself, and I feel like I should have been able to find that even with just 2 minutes on my clock. More just the fact that because I didn't play that, I had to win in the fashion of both of us making a mistake. And that just made me a bit uncomfortable, and I also honestly really felt bad for Ian that he had to feel afterwards that he could have won the title and he only lost it because he made a mistake. And like I said, Ian handled this super, super well afterwards, and again, major, major credit to him, but I just felt really bad about that he most likely had to, on some level, still feel that way, that he let it slip. Whereas if I had just played as Chu, then there wouldn't have been that same feeling because he would have had no wins in the endgame. Now, of course, there were earlier plays in the game that maybe both of us could have played differently that would have changed the outcome. It's just that when you get to the endgame in Scrabble, there's a sense of finality and concreteness that you don't get at any other point in the game. Because whenever there are tiles in the bag, there's randomness. And you can't just say, oh, this play definitively lost me the game because there's a chance everything else would have happened differently. When you get to the end game and you make a game-losing mistake, you can say definitively that this mistake cost me the game. And I just know for me, because of that, I've always taken endgame mistakes and losses in the endgame so much harder, because then you know the only person to blame is yourself. And just because of that, like I said, this really ate at me a lot, if I'm being honest, after the game. I've since, thought about it a lot more, and it still bothers me to some extent, but at least I think the way to look at this is that, Scrabble is a really, really awesome, but also really, really hard game. And this was not a straightforward endgame for either of us by any means, and that applies regardless of the circumstances. This is just by nature a super complicated game and super complicated position. When you couple that with what was at stake here, again, final game of the Nationals deciding finals here, after such a crazy back and forth match and both of us being low on time, I think it almost would have been superhuman for one of us, let alone both of us, to play this game precisely. You see in other big sporting events, with tennis or golf or any other number of sports, even for these professional athletes, the pressure does get to them and they make mistakes. It adds a human element to the game, I think, when you see the best in the world at anything making mistakes. And if everybody always plays perfectly, in a sense, that makes it less interesting to watch, and also gives both top players like myself and Ian and the viewers less motivation. If we're all perfect, then we don't have room to improve, and there's no hope for anybody else because they'll never be as good as us. So I think illustrating that we're not perfect is really good for the game. And like I said, I still am a little bit disappointed that it had to end this way after such a spectacular match, but I've been trying to look at it that way, both to make myself feel a little better about it, and also to try to just spin everything in a positive light and try to make this as good of a thing as possible for the Scrabble community and the game as a whole. So just thought it would be useful to share some thoughts on that, guys. As always, feel free to let me know what you think in the comment section. And in any case, it is what it is. What happened, happened. So let's make the most of it. And now let's finish our analysis of this truly fascinating game. We've pretty much exhausted the endgame at this point. We've talked about what happened after I dropped the J and what I should have done instead of dropping the J. So now let's go back another turn. Before I dropped the J, Ian had this truly fascinating position where there was one in the bag and he decided to play Tog for 8 points. Now, was this the correct play for Ian? As I mentioned before, Ian should probably assume he's got a 50-50 shot at drawing the J regardless of what he does. Because my previous play of just dropping the keg strongly suggests I did not hold the J when I made that decision, because this is a fairly inflexible board for the J. It's a difficult tile to play, and I likely would have prioritized getting rid of the J first, holding the K for the next turn instead of cashing in with the K immediately, hoping to have a good spot to play the J on my next turn. So if Ian thinks I didn't have the J when I played KI, that means with 2 in the bag and me having played 1, I had a 50-50 chance of drawing it, which means there's a 50-50 chance it's still in the bag and Ian is about to draw it. So he would definitely like to make a play that gives him some winning chances if he draws the J. The problem is, there really isn't a good way to do that. Tog, as it turns out, would not have won for Ian if he drew the J. As we saw, he drew the U, which, given optimal play by me, which, like we saw, I did not unfortunately execute, would have lost for Ian. But it turns out drawing the J would not have done any better for him after Tog. Let me show you why. If Ian draws the J after Tog, then I have a much more flexible rack than I did in the real game, not having to deal with it myself. I have a number of wins here, the most straightforward of which is to play Cowrie to the I in Alluviate, keeping the super flexible EHS on my next turn, which is going to go out in several spots. With this rack, it's very difficult for Ian to get rid of the J. His best play appears to be Jut for 12 points, blocking my super high-scoring outplay of Shay down the F column. And after he does that, then I can still go out with She and Togs on the bottom right, which is going to win this game easily by a 20-point margin. So not too hard to see that Ian will be sunk after Tog if he draws the J. And it turns out there really aren't any plays for Ian in the pre-endgame that will win for him if he draws the J. None of the Engine Makondo's suggestions for Ian in the pre-endgame win with a J draw. So I think the reason for that mainly is like we just saw in the endgame I showed you guys after Tog. If Ian draws the J, there are so few places to play it on this board. And I'm going to have a flexible enough rack where it's pretty easy for me to just go out in 2. And Ian's going to have to drop his J off for like 12 points, and if I go out in 2, I'll still get a bunch of extra points from his rack and win the game pretty comfortably. So Ian, I think here, needs to play as if he's sunk if he draws the J, and he needs to hope to draw whatever the other tile was that was in the bag when I played KI. He needs to hope I drew the J, and that he is going to draw the other tile. So with that in mind, let me show you what the Makondo engine suggests are Ian's best plays here. Makondo finds 2 different plays that win, in theory, 5 out of 8 of the time. They are Old for 13 points under Urge, winning when Ian draws A, C, E, H, or R out of the bag, as well as the 14-point Legit through the G in Urge, winning when Ian draws A, E, H, R, S out of the bag. Now you'll notice that neither of these plays win when Ian draws the J, and as it turns out, both of these plays would have also lost given the U that was actually in the bag. However, these appear to be the plays that mathematically give Ian the best chance. Now, in a vacuum, it's 5 out of 8, because 5 out of the 8 tiles in the bag that Ian could draw would result in a win. Like I said, in practice, I think it's a lot less than that, because the J is much more likely than 1 in 8 to be in the bag. So probably these plays still win considerably less than 5 out of 8 of the time, but if Ian is sunk regardless, if he draws the J, he might as well maximize the number of non-J tiles he wins with. So either of these 2 plays, theoretically, would have been optimal. I don't want to go through all of the possible endgames after each play, as it's going to take so long and this video is already one of the longest in the history of my channel. The one case I will go over is what would happen if Ian draws the U. How do I win with the rack I actually had after either Legit or Old? Let's start with Legit. If Ian plays Legit, then the Eschew Raja sequence no longer works, because if I play Eschew, Ian just goes out down the B column with Doubt and wins on the spot, so I need to come up with something else. My best play here turns out to be the tricky to see Jeer through the E in Legit for 25 points, which will result in a win. The idea here is I save the sneaky Cashew to the EW to go out on my next turn, and if Ian blocks that, I still have Tack for 27 points in the bottom right. I'll leave you guys to check that Ian's best play here is actually not to block Cashew. He should just play Oot for 17 on the bottom. And then, of course, after I go out with Cashew, I'm going to win the game pretty comfortably by a final margin of 11 points. If instead of Legit, Ian goes with Old in the original position, then now, and only now, the Eschew sequence works. Because with EITTU, Ian cannot go out on his next turn. And as before, he's not going to be able to stop both Jar and Raja. His best play is just to play Tut for 8 down the B column, blocking my higher scoring outplay. I go out for 13, and I end up winning the game by 5, 409 to 404. So, like I said, as it turns out, either of Ian's theoretically optimal plays of Old or Legit would have led to a loss given either the J or the U draw, assuming, of course, I played optimally. Now, like I said, I'm not even going to try to go through all of the different possible draws and endgames in this video. It's extremely complicated, and I think it would be completely unrealistic to expect a human, especially under this time pressure and general stress of the situation, to be able to go through that and conclusively determine that old or legit win 5 out of 8 times. And for that matter, that Ian's actual play of Tog only wins 2.5 times. Again, technically 3 in this case, because this does tie if Ian draws the H, and a tie would result in Ian winning the title. So Tog is 3 out of 8 for Ian, theoretically with optimal play on my end. Again, this is basically impossible to compute in real time, and I'm not going to attempt to go through all the details. If so, this is going to be like a 3-hour video. But I think given the circumstances, Tog was an extremely strong play on Ian's part. It still would have won him the title 3 out of 8 times, assuming optimal play from me, and I think it complicates things for me a lot more than his other plays. As we saw, it actually induced me to make a mistake myself in my own endgame. And I think the reason it makes it more complicated than a play like Legit is it plays fewer tiles. By only playing 2 tiles, Ian leaves more tiles on his rack. He'll have 6 tiles on his rack after Tog as opposed to just 4 after Legit. And if Ian has more tiles on his rack, that's more different possible plays for him I have to consider, and that means more possibilities I have to permute under time pressure, which is more likely to lead to a mistake on my end. Even if Tog is not theoretically optimal, Ian is not playing Macondo here. I think it's a great play practically given the circumstances. Now, the one final play I want to talk about a little bit more before closing out this video is the previous turn where I dropped my K after Ian played FE. Like I said, I was debating between dropping the K for 22, which I eventually did, and playing Escar immediately for 45 points. Escar is the much more forcing option here. It goes directly into an endgame where I'm going to have only 3 tiles left on my rack, and takes a 17-point lead. A 17-point lead is fairly significant on this tight a board. But, like I mentioned earlier, I was a bit concerned about certain possible draws. In particular, if I drew the J and another consonant, I knew I was going to get J stuck after Ian blocked my only spot with Joe to the Owen Mock. Now, it turns out, like I alluded to earlier, that Escar would have won 25 out of 36 times, depending on what I drew out of the bag. With 2 in the bag, there are 9 possible tiles I can draw. 9 choose 2 is 36. There are 36 different 2-tile combinations I can draw. 25 of those are winners, 11 of those are losers. Again, assuming that Ian plays optimally in the endgame after that. I am definitely not going to go through all of those endgames, but I'll go through 1 or 2 instructive ones, and I think that'll kind of illustrate the themes for when I win and when I lose. Like I said, it's very easy to see I'm going to lose if I draw the J and a consonant because I'm J-stuck. Ian plays off 1 tile at a time and wins easily. If I draw a J and a vowel, though, it's a little bit more interesting because then I'm not necessarily going to be stuck. So let's use the example of what would have hypothetically happened in the game if I had played Escar immediately. I would have picked up J-U. Here, Ian would have had D-E-I-L-O-T-T, as he had in the actual game when he played Tog. And with JKU in my rack, I am not J-stuck, because in addition to JO, I'm also threatening Jug to the G in Urge, as well as the disconnected Jawp down the F column through the A in Alluviate and the P in Diapasons. And Ian cannot quite get enough points here to win. His best endgame appears to be low T for 8 down the E column to the I in Alluviate. If he plays that, then with JKU, I'm going to just play Jug to the G in Urge, and then his best bet is to go out with Tide for 15, which is going to end in a 6-point win for me, 422 to 416 when all is said and done. So as it turns out, given what actually happened in the game, Escar would have won for me in the endgame. But that's just one of many possible draws I could have after Escar, and it's possible I might not even draw the J. Interestingly, there are several losing draws after Escar when I don't draw the J, which is a little bit surprising because it feels like it's going to be tough for Ian to get rid of the J. However, they all share the same really cool common theme, so let me show you. Let's take the example of me drawing OT out of the bag after Escar, so that would leave me with a rack after my play of KOT in the endgame. It feels at first like I should be winning here, because with KOT, I'm still threatening plays like Kit down the G column for a lot, and I have several other K plays as well, and there don't appear to be any great options for Ian with his J. It's not hard to see that a play like Jedi for 24 down the E column is going to fall well short after Kit. But Ian has a truly jaw-dropping way to win this game. There is a single winning play for Ian in this position, and it is due for 3 points to the Owen Mock. The idea here is setting up an unblockable Jute and Udo, which is going to come down for 61 on Ian's next turn. There's absolutely nothing I can do to stop it. All I can do is sit and watch and play Kit for 25, as Ian plays Jute for 61 points, taking a big lead, and all I can do is go out for 7 with 2, which is not going to be enough. Ian is going to win this game 436 to 447. So that means after Escar, I more or less need to avoid 2 outcomes if I want to win. One outcome is drawing the J in a consonant and getting J stuck. The other outcome is drawing 2 tiles other than the J in such a way that it allows Ian to set up Do and then a huge J-U play with Udo on his next turn. So that's why you guys can see here on the Macondo output that most of my losses are either a J and a consonant or 2 non-J tiles that are not the D and the U. Because if I draw either the D or the U, then Ian's Do followed by Udo plan does not exist. So really, really fascinating stuff there. Certainly not something I was going to have the time or capacity to calculate during this game. So that's an explanation for why the wins after Escar are the wins and why the losses are the losses. Once again, this play wins, assuming optimal play from Ian, 25 out of 36, which is just shy of 70% of the time. So is KI better or worse? Well, the short answer is I'm not positive, because unfortunately the Macondo engine does not at present have the ability to precisely calculate 2-in-the-bag pre-endgames where the play does not empty the bag. So Macondo is unable to give us a concrete answer on what my winning percentage is after KI given optimal play from Ian. However, as we saw during the game, I think if I can avoid drawing the J, I'm almost always winning here. Because Ian isn't going to have a lot of great plays with the J. If he plays something like Jug to the G in Urge, then I should be able to play Escar on my next turn and then go out with whatever 1 tile I have and win. And if Ian doesn't have the J, then he's just not going to have a lot of viable pre-endgame options. Like we saw, his plays like Legit or Tog all lose whenever he draws the J. So I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure after KI, if I don't draw the J, I'm going to be able to win this game. Now, there's still so many possibilities to consider, because I could draw any of the 8 tiles other than the J could still be in the bag, the J could be on Ian's rack. There are so many possibilities, and I'm not going to even attempt to go through all of them manually, let alone talk about them in this video. But if my instinct is right, that KI will win as long as I don't draw the J, whether Ian already has it and it doesn't have a great way to play it while also blocking Escar, or whether it stays in the bag and Ian draws it and has trouble unloading it in the endgame. If that instinct is correct, then KI should win at least 8 out of 9 times, because I only draw the J 1 in 9, with there being 1 J and 9 tiles. So if that's correct, that KI wins 8 out of 9 or more, then that's a lot better than the 70% or so after playing Escar immediately. It's also possible that 8 over 9 is an underestimate, because maybe there are still some cases where I draw the J after KI and win. In fact, we actually saw, given what Ian had, and that the U was still the tile in the bag, his pre-endgames all would have lost, given my rack, even when I drew the J. So that would suggest it's even higher than 8 out of 9. Now, there's also the factor that Ian just played FE, and that may suggest he's a little bit less likely than average to have the J, as, again, the J is a really troublesome tile on this board, and he might have wanted to try to prioritize unloading it quickly if he had it. That being said, I think this is a little bit more of a difficult inference than from Ian's perspective on his next turn, when my play of KI suggested I didn't have the J. Because the key is, when we go back to Ian's play of FE in this position, it accomplishes a significant goal, namely blocking game-ending 60-point plays in the bottom left corner. And I should be able to realize that from my perspective and think, okay, it's quite possible Ian actually played that with the J, figuring if he doesn't play that immediately, he just loses on the spot so many times that I could even see him holding the J and playing this. So I think it's dangerous to infer for sure that Ian did not have the J when he played FE. Is he slightly less likely than average to have had the J? Maybe. But I think it's too much of a stretch to say he's very likely to have not had the J with FE, and certainly too much of a stretch to say he's guaranteed to not have had it with FE. So in practice, what is my win percentage with KI? My instinct tells me that, like I said, if I can dodge the J, I'll almost always, if not always, be winning this game, which, if that's correct, would put KI as a better play than Escar immediately. Am I correct in that instinct, though? I'm not sure. Like I said, the powerful engine, unfortunately, is not powerful enough to tell us definitively at this point, and I'm not going to attempt right now, either on my own time or in this video, to go through every possible pre-endgame sequence in terms of what I draw, what's still in the bag, and what Ian's best pre-endgame plays would be. It's simply too time and computationally intensive with the tools we have right now. If anybody is able to come up with a concrete solution to this and let me know whether KI is theoretically a better or worse play than Eskar, please do let me know. But I warn you, this kind of stuff takes a while, and it's also addictive and fun. So be careful if you try, but if you do, I'm all for it, and let me know what you find. So, I think that's about all I have to say for this one, guys. What an incredible game and finish. Like I said, a bit of a shame that it had to end with a couple mistakes at the end, but I don't want to let that take away from what a remarkable match this was from both myself and my competitor, Ian Weinstein. We both played some incredible Scrabble throughout all 5 of these games, and these positions at the end of this game, as you can see, this video is going to be close to an hour and a half long, which is, I believe, a Mack Meller record at this point, and most of that hour and a half was spent on the positions with 8 or fewer tiles in the bag. So these positions took me longer to explain, far longer to explain, than the amount of time either of us had in the actual game, which was just like 2 minutes. And during that, we had no outside tools at our disposal. We were under tremendous amounts of duress. Like I said before, I think it would have been almost too hard to believe if neither of us made a mistake. So, like I said, on one hand, a bit of a shame it had to end that way, but on the other hand, I think it kind of makes it a little bit more relatable, and it gives us motivation not only to get better as human players, but also to keep improving our computer analysis, because as great as the Macondo engine is, as we see, it's not perfect. It can't tell us definitively whether KI is a good play in this position. So it's awesome and it's a great tool, but it still has its limitations, and I know Cesar and the Woogles team are still working on it, and I can't wait to see how it continues to improve as they continue building out its various capabilities. I think that's all I have to say for this one, guys. I'll put the final position on the board one more time over here. Like I said, it ended in a 441 to 396 win for me in this decisive Game 5. And this is how I ended up becoming the 2024 Scrabble Players Champion. So, certainly an experience I'll never forget, not only because of the amazing quality of Scrabble played by both myself and Ian in this series, but also just the emotional roller coaster of having to start down 2-0 and then pull off improbable comebacks in both Games 3 and 4 to force a decisive Game 5, and a Game 5 that was also a wild roller coaster in its own way, starting up over 100 points, Ian clawing his way back, retaking the lead, and then one of the most chaotic, complicated, and memorable pre-endgame and endgame sequences you will ever see in a game of Scrabble. So, absolutely incredible stuff. Once again, major thank you and kudos to my opponent, Ian Weinstein. He played an incredible match here. It was an absolute pleasure to be a part of this, and I have full faith he will be back on this stage very soon. Also, one more shout out to all of my supporters, my friends and family, and also all of you guys, to my viewers for the last year or so supporting my channel. I really can't thank you enough for all your support, and I can't wait to see what we can all do to grow this awesome game in the future. So, thank you all so much, guys. Really hope you enjoyed this video and this 5-game recap series. Much more awesome SPC content to come in the coming weeks. Please stay tuned. Thank you again for watching. Have a great weekend, and I will see you soon for the next video. Bye-bye.